Hello everyone, the Instant Camera Guy here, and welcome to the 2000 subscriber special, where we will be doing yet another AMA. Over the last few weeks, I asked you guys to send me questions. You guys heeded the call, and I will be doing my best to answer those questions today as best as I possibly can. I wanted to say thank you to everyone that submitted the question, but also just wanted to say thanks yet again to every single one of my followers, to anyone that has given me a like or a subscribe or shared my page or referred my information to someone else, has sent me something to fix, or has simply just sent me some kind of spare parts, product to review, 3D printed piece or whatever it may be. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, because it's your generosity and your patronage that helps keep a small little independent business like mine alive. As I've said before, I am a one-man operation here. It is just me. This guy. It's just me. Whenever you comment and you get a response, it's from me. When you email me and you get a response, it's from me. And yeah, basically it is my full-time career now doing this kind of repair stuff. And I want to try and keep my main job fixing these classic cameras for as long as possible. So yeah, I wanted to give some specific shout outs to Nick Kandari, to Johnny Ng from Polar Studios. I wanted to thank Augustus from Mint. I wanted to thank Lachlan McCoy, and I wanted to thank Eric Espinoza specifically for their generous donations to the channel. Each one of them has sent me some kind of spare parts, product to review, or little bits and pieces that I can then use to help fix other people's cameras. And yeah, if it wasn't for your generosity and patronage, I just simply wouldn't be able to do as much as I can do on this channel. Now, before I launch into answering some of the questions, because I'm going to do it pretty much like I did last time, I'm going to try and keep it with as minimal cuts as possible and just try and explain stuff on the fly as best as I can. I've got my laptop off to the side where I've pre-cut some of the questions up so that I can just scroll through them and have a look. So I'll be doing some answers in just a second. But before I go into that, I just wanted to give a shout out to a very good friend of mine named John Umina. And he lives in Victoria, where I used to live. And I wanted to give him a shout out, not only because he's just a really friggin' nice guy. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met. He's big into film photography. He's big into a lot of fine art. But mainly I want to give a shout out because he has also started a little one-man work from home business called Lumina Labs. So basically it's a play on his last name and lumens, which is a measurement of light. But yeah, he runs his own little very niche developing lab for 35mm 120 format film. He runs it from home. He's got his own professional scanners and that kind of stuff. So if you guys are into film photography and you want someone who, like me, is the type of business where it's just one guy, you know the quality that you're getting, you know that you can ask for specific little bits and pieces and critiques, and if you like your images scanned a certain way, like I'm sure he's happy to help out. If you want that little small business touch in terms of your film developing, then he is the guy to speak to. I'm going to leave all of his contact information in the links below so that you can check him out. But yeah, basically I want him to have every success in the world because he deserves it. As I said before, he's one of the nicest guys ever. And after years of working in the corporate world, in a office cubicle, grinding away doing computer programming, he's decided to go and start his own business. There was a whole bunch of hurdles. He had a battle with cancer at some stage. And yeah, I want every single part of his business to thrive. So I highly recommend that you guys check him out. He does mail-in orders. He does digital scans. Yeah, I'm sure he'd be happy to take care of you. So I just wanted to mention that. He hasn't paid me to say any of that. In fact, I don't even think he really knows that I'm going to mention any of this, but I want him to succeed. So now that that's out of the way, let us go on to some of the questions. Now, the first question was not asked by anyone in particular, but was asked by multiple people over the last few weeks, and that is, do I sell cameras? And the answer to that is yes, I do. All of these ones that you see here before you are for sale. Now these are all cameras that I've basically built out of either spare parts, cameras that have been donated to me, cameras that have been sent in for trade-ins. For example, sometimes I will have clients send some cameras my way. They might send me, 3 or 4 of them all at once for me to refurbish. And they might say, like, look, I'm only really after 2 of them back. So, make me a camera out of whatever spare parts you think are the most suitable. You can keep the rest. And so I do. And quite often I end up with enough spare parts to just build functioning cameras. Sometimes they're hybrids, such as this one, which is an SX70 Model 2 and Model 1 hybrid. Basically put together. Generally, when I refurbish cameras like this, I will modify them so that they take I-type film. So these ones have all been battery modified, with the exception of the gold Sonar here. But yeah, they are all for sale. If you want to know what I have, it's simply just a matter of asking me. I generally have something in stock. If not, I have the parts to build something in stock, but please bear in mind this is not my main business model. At the moment, I happen to have quite a bit. That's not always the case. My main business model is refurbishing cameras for you, the viewer. Because what people do is they will send me in, let's say they send me in their chrome and tan SX70. They go, oh, it's really beat up. It's please refurbish it from the ground up, get it working. And that's a good business model for me because it means that the customer is getting exactly what they want. They've already selected a camera. They're telling me what they want to do to refurbish it. They get to choose the color of skin. They get to choose the mods they want. And it means that I end up building them something specific. I don't actually really like the retail model because I can never please everyone, and it actually low-key does my head in because I will get people asking, they'll say, what do you have for sale? And I'll say, oh, I have this one up. And I go, oh, if only it was purple and not pink. Or, oh, if only it was like tan instead of black. Oh, if only... etc., etc. Oh, if only it was a Sonar. Oh, if only it was an Alpha. Oh, I was really after the Model 1. And I just can't please everyone. I've tried in the past to just offer up like no skin cameras, just completely blank canvases. And then I find that I have the trouble that people then can't visualize what the camera is going to look like with the skin. So I really can't win either way. So I don't really like selling cameras. But with that said, I generally always have something to sell if you want something that is unique and custom made and rebuilt from the ground up by hand. Every single one of these cameras that you see right here has been stripped down to its chassis, restored from the ground up, tested with film, and is guaranteed to work. So yeah, I do sell cameras. It is not my main business model. But yeah, if you don't want to go through the hassle of looking for one secondhand, getting ripped off by some eBay seller, scouring antique stores for days on end, you can just ask and I'm happy to sell you one that's been pre-made. Just please don't contact me going like, oh, would you mind changing the skin color to something else? Because I will get very annoyed very quickly. So... but yes, I do sell cameras. If you want to buy one, please feel free. Everything that I'm selling has been refurbished. So yeah, if you want one, feel free to hit me up. And if you are early enough, as I said, every single camera that I just featured in that little video segment is for sale. So yeah, feel free to get in touch if you want to nab one of these and make it yours. So let's get on with some actual viewer questions now. So I'm just going to bring them up on my laptop. All right. Now, the first question is from Nick, who I gave a shout out before. He goes on Instagram on Photokandari. That is his handle. He says, having worked on Mint's products, what is your thought of them remaking the Rollei 35? Now, I obviously don't own one of those cameras, so I'm probably just going to pop up some image splash on the screen. I don't really have a thought on the on Mint's new Rollei 35. As far as I'm aware, Mint has sort of like purchased the brand name of Rollei. Rollei, as in the manufacturer of Rolleiflex TLRs, kind of went out of business. I think in like the mid 2000s was their like last ever like TLR camera that they sold. They dissolved the company, and now they kind of exist as this like name brand only, kind of like what happened to Polaroid back in like the 2000s, you know, where you would just get the name Polaroid slapped on any consumer electronics, like very cheap televisions and that kind of stuff. What I will say, Mint as a company generally release quite good products, like their actual things like their flash bars, which I just did a massive video on. If you guys didn't see that, their flash bars are very, very good. I recommend them. They've also invented things like a really neat looking I-type battery adapter, which I've also done a video on. Now that I-type battery adapter, it did have an issue where it was hard to open and close the camera, but that issue is fixable, and I've been told that their modern batches of those I-type adapters no longer have that problem. But yeah, Mint as a company are very capable of making very, very nice products. With that said, there was the Instax wide camera. I think it's called the RF70. Again, I've never personally owned one of those because I just don't really like Fuji Instax. I don't like what Fuji did to peel apart film, and I just don't really want to support a company that doesn't seem to care much about the longevity of film. But I digress. But I do know that a lot of people were very unhappy with the RF70. Apparently it was quite janky and it didn't expose very well, and there was a lot of criticisms about it. But I won't speak personally about that. They were all just alleged. I have, as I said, no real experience with the RF series of cameras. So I think only time will tell. It does seem to be very nice. I think the price point is good, considering how much premium point-and-shoot cameras sell for. But I think the real tell will be the lens, because a camera is only as good as its lens, and the original Rollei 35 had a stunning variety of lenses. Up into, they definitely had Tessars, but I'm sure they also had Sonars on some Rolleis, on some Rollei 35s. And yeah, Mint has very, very big shoes to fill in terms of being able to match the original. But I think it looks pretty cool from what I've seen. But yeah, I'm not going to say anything about its quality or design or anything like that until I see one in person. But even then, I already have heaps of 35mm cameras. And I probably don't need a new point and shoot. So like, you know, why do I need one of those when I have this? You know, this is the more 35mm camera than you will ever need in your life. So yeah, I'm probably not the right market for the camera, but it looks really cool. And I think anyone building new film photography products in 2024 is doing the right thing. I will say that Pentax's offering was a little strange. There was a lot of buzz about Pentax releasing a new 35mm camera this year, and then they came out with the Pentax 17, which is like a half frame, like a little half frame sort of zone focus point and shoot, and like that was a little like. It was just like a baffling design choice. I was like, did anyone ask for this camera? like it was sort of like, yeah, it was like, I think it's like someone had an idea for the design of it and was like, maybe if we build it, they'll come. Like, it wasn't like, oh, there's a demand for this. Like, people really want a modern half frame with a zone focus lens. I think the demand for a film camera at the moment is something point and shoot, like a premium point and shoot. That's where the market demand is, specifically to appeal to people that want the film look but don't want to learn actual photography. So Pentax's offering I thought was a little bit strange. Again, I'm just simply not the market for it. And it looks like a cool camera. I'm not sure if I like the design, but yeah, Mint's Rollei 35 certainly looks a lot cooler. It looks the part. So yeah, I guess we'll see. All right, on to the next question. Matt Applegate says, when did I get my first Polaroid camera? How about my first SX70? Well, my first Polaroid camera was around the same time that Impossible Project was coming out. So I got a peel apart land camera, one like this. This is one that I custom made many years ago. That a client then donated back to me. This is one that I built him, that I modified it with a manual focus lens and yada, yada, yada. So I had like the automatic version of this, and I modified it to take AAAs. This is back when you could buy Fuji peel apart film. FP100C was about $11 per pack, Australian, which is like $6.50 US. So it was insanely cheap. And this was, one of these was like my first Polaroid camera, specifically the model 100. And after that, I got myself a Polaroid, like just a Sun 600. Like one of these. And I actually started off using 600 cameras long before I ever shot SX70s. And the reason for that is very simple. In the early days of Impossible Project film, like I'm talking around 2012, 2013, going into 2014, 600 film was just infinitely better than SX70. And maybe I'll try splash up a few images on the screen. But in my personal opinion, SX70, it was not worth shooting it. Like the images were so crappy, the colors were so washed out, the film was so hard to find in Australian stores, and I actually got way better photos from just a standard box type 600 than I ever got on an SX70. So my first SX70 was a chrome Sonar with the black leather panels. It arrived completely working, and back then I didn't know any better, so I just used it completely unrefurbished. But the film was just so garbage. Didn't matter what you set the light dark wheel to, hardly anything would come out. So I never really bothered with SX70 cameras for the longest time. And in my opinion, it wasn't really until like 2017 that SX70 film became good enough to actually warrant going back to it. And so it was around 2017, 2018 that I started delving into more repair of SX70 cameras. And then that continued. And in 2022, I think maybe end of 2021, 2022, that was when, as a repair technician, I decided to delve into, that's it, SX70s are the best cameras ever, and I will only be overhauling them. I will not be doing as needed repairs. It is overhaul or get out of my face. But yeah, my first SX70 experience actually was just a total dud. In terms of my early days of shooting Polaroid, that's why my logo, if you go on my Facebook page, my logo is a custom colored Polaroid 600, because this is the Polaroid that I fell in love with. And when I think of a Polaroid, if someone says, oh, show me a Polaroid camera, this is what I think of. I think of the box type 600, because in my opinion, although the SX70 is a technological tour de force, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The SX70 is the most amazing, technologically advanced camera of all time. But I actually think that the Polaroid 600 is probably the most important in terms of a mass-produced camera. And I actually think that the 600, like this particular body style with like the flip-up flash, the really square 80s body, I don't think these ever get enough credit, because considering how relatively simple they are, and considering that they are held together completely without a single screw, they are quite easy to repair, they are insanely reliable, they're very easy to modify to take 600 film, and I just don't think people give the humble 600 enough credit. They are just super awesome cameras. So yeah, in terms of my first Polaroids, like I consider the 600 to be a very, very important step. And it was how I started my business, was actually I would take apart, clean them from the inside out. I would often repaint them in various different crazy colors. And that's where my business started. That's how the Instant Camera Guy started. It wasn't until many years later, when the film became good enough, in my opinion, that I actually decided to give SX70s the light of day. But yeah, that's a very good question. Let's see what the next one says. Mini Cutthroat, I believe their name is Gage. They said, do I ever plan on expanding the business, like making my own shop and custom parts? Absolutely I do. At the moment, as I've said in a few videos previously, just in passing, I am currently not where I would like to be in terms of my housing situation. I am operating out of a very small spare bedroom, because where I'm currently living is undergoing a housing crisis. Houses are super unaffordable. And despite having sold my house in Victoria, back in Melbourne where I lived, I've basically come over here to Western Australia and there is hardly anything on the market. And what does go for sale on the market goes for an insanely high price above what they're asking. So I've literally been outbid on places by a factor of around $150,000. So where I am right now is not what I would like to be doing. Where I used to live in Victoria, had I been operating my YouTube channel out of that house, I think I would be doing bigger and better things simply because I had more space. It doesn't require so much space to, fix a camera. I can do the whole lot in a workbench around this size, but space is necessary for storage of parts, building custom projects, having bigger and better tools, being able to store more client repair jobs, being able to keep more stock. There's lots of things that extra space allows me to do. I don't think I necessarily want to make custom-made parts. I know 3D printing is a very, very cool thing, but it's a lot of money. And in my opinion, just the technology isn't there yet. Like when 3D printing can get to the stage of being pretty much like on par with injection molded plastic parts, I think I'll take the dive and invest into it. But at the moment, I'm not quite there. I've toyed with the idea of getting my own die cutter so that I can make my own leather panels. But even then, I don't really see a point, because Aki Asahi, who is the leather producer that I use in Japan, I've been using him since day one whenever I've had to do an SX70 or any other kind of Polaroid. I actually had him make lots of custom leather panels for me in the past. His quality is so good and so cheap that by the time I invest in a die cutter, get all the adhesives, find a leather supplier, spend the time cutting it myself, the quality I can get from Aki Asahi for the price, there's no incentive for me to go and start doing my own leather panels when he's just that good. But obviously Aki's not going to be around forever, so that is probably something that I'll do in the future, because it'll be one less thing for me to have to rely on. But I'm always trying to find ways to expand in terms of different add-ons and things that I can do, especially when I can build stuff using off-the-shelf parts. For example, my Polar battery solution. Very proud of this, and I'm constantly constantly trying to figure out, I should say, new ways of just pushing the envelope. For example, I made the 9-volt version earlier this year. I've obviously got the 210-440 volt solution. I'm currently working on yet another battery type adapter, which I'm going to keep completely secret for now, but hopefully that will see the light of day soon enough. So yeah, I'm constantly trying to expand and figure things out. But yeah, I think certainly getting a house with a bigger workshop will be step number one. And we'll see how things go. There's always potential for me to have more of a sales presence, update my website, and actually have a for sale section. But as I said earlier in the video, I don't necessarily like selling stuff, so I don't know if I'll do that. But what I will say is that we are currently living in a time where now more than ever, there is just so many options in terms of upgrading these SX70s, and it's only going to get more crazy from here. I'm doing a lot of work with Yongmin Liu from the SX70 project. The SX70R project. We've got so many little bits and pieces on the back burner that are coming in the future that I'll be involved in either design critique or beta testing. He's been a real joy to work with because like anything that I recommend, he'll implement within like the space of a week or two. Like it's been really, really good. Like there was a coding issue with his SX70R PCBs and the guy had it figured out in like 24 hours. So he's really, really awesome. So yeah, there will be stuff in the horizon for sure. So it's an exciting time to be into the Polaroids. Simple as that. So make sure that you're subscribed and turn the little bell thing on to keep up to date with my videos, because I will be releasing videos on some of that exciting stuff once it comes out. But yeah, I won't say too much because, as I said, a lot of it is in beta testing and stuff at the moment. So I won't spoil anything until it sees the light of day. But yeah, just be known that there's cool stuff coming. All right, Lance asks, he's asked two questions actually. He says, what realistic features, other than user replaceable batteries, would I wish for in a new Polaroid camera? And he also asks, have I tried to make my own instant DTP prints before? I do not know what a DTP print is. So that answers that. No, I haven't tried it. I don't know what it is. But in terms of features that I would like to see on a Polaroid camera, let me just grab my Polaroid i2. All right. I know I've discussed the Polaroid i2 at length. Anyone that's familiar with my channel should know that I had two huge criticisms with the i2. For the record, I think it's a fantastic camera. The engineering is really, really good. The camera's built well. The plastic is a decent quality. Everything about it is nice. But I had two main criticisms. Number one being the battery in it was not user replaceable. Now, I made mine user replaceable by cutting a little side panel here because there is ample room inside to fit a replacement battery. And I actually have my camera running at the moment, not off the original battery, but I've actually just got a generic from AliExpress replacement in here. So this is not the original factory battery. This is just an AliExpress special 800 milliamp hour battery of the same dimensions that I wired onto a JST connector. And that runs the camera absolutely perfectly. So yeah, just to prove a point, I'm actually running it off of, a non-factory original battery. But yeah, so one of my criticisms was that because I firmly believe that every product should have a user replaceable battery, because back in the day, it was just a standard feature. And there really is no excuse for not making a battery user replaceable, because it will not hold a charge forever. And even bigger than just the fact that it has a non-user replaceable battery was just how difficult it was to get inside to replace that, which is why I added that little extension cord and the little door so that I never have to take the thing apart to do it again. So yeah, I would love to see the user replaceable battery, but obviously you mentioned that in the comment. My other big criticism with the i2 was that the exposure was just all over the place. Now, I will be doing a separate video on this subject, but there is a new firmware update that is coming. I don't know why it's taken them 9 months, but I am happy to report that, just ignore the light leaks. This happened because I was transferring film from one pack to another. I think the days of i2s constantly overexposing images will soon be over. I was hand-selected to do some beta testing, probably because I was one of the loudest complainers. So I actually had someone reach out and send me some new firmware for the Polaroid i2, which updated updated the way that the light meter works. And yeah, I believe that they'll soon be rolling that out shortly. From my testing, and after this video, I'm gonna go out and buy some more film and do some more testing and release a video fully on that subject. But it looks like at least one of the big issues has been corrected. So one thing that I think would be nice is perhaps like a firmware-based, like in the app, memory type thing adjustment where you could actually set the ISO manually. Like obviously there's 640 and 160. I think it would be nice to actually set the ISO manually to compensate for different batches of film. Because what's becoming apparent, and again, I'm going to go into this when I do a full video, is that Polaroid 600 and I-type and SX70 film, when there's a variation in terms of the batch developing chemical formulation, I believe what it can start to do is change the effective ISO of the film. So although the negative is staying the same at 640, what's happening is that the dev chemicals are kind of acting like a push or a pull and changing how the ultimate image looks. So sometimes you can get images that, although they're 640 ISO, maybe they're behaving more like 400 ISO or more like 800 ISO. So I actually think that I would like to see, like especially since these are Bluetooth, have Bluetooth connectivity, I would like to see you be able to manually set the ISO in order to compensate for that. Because at the moment, everyone's been going, oh yeah, if you just set the exposure compensation, 2 notches to the side or whatever people have discovered is the best, then that works. But I don't think the issue with that is then you lose the +2 and -2 exposure compensation. So I think it would be nice to be able to do that in software and really dial it in specifically so that if you are a true artist that blows through heaps of film, especially in a pro camera, I think it would be nice to dial it into exactly what you want. I would also like to see manual focus being added to these. Again, I think it's a real drop the ball moment in terms of the i2, the fact that you can't focus it manually. The option would be nice, especially for things like mirror selfies, focusing where the scene is very tricky and has multiple things in focus. And I think it would have been nice to separate the focus from the auto exposure, because when you half press the button in the Polaroid i2, it locks both exposure and focus to the same thing, which I think there's probably a better way of doing that, because what you want to be in focus is not necessarily always the thing that you want a meter for. Like, I know obviously these are designed for manual use in mind, and you can always spot meter and dial it in specifically for what it is that you want, but I think prioritizing a really, really good and accurate automatic mode should be priority number 1 in terms of Polaroid cameras, because things like the SX70R project, like this purple camera has the brand new SX70R PCB, it just nails the exposure like all the time. And like I said, that project is, just a guy in China, like literally just working on his own. Like, it's not a team of people, it's just a guy. And if he can get the exposure dialed in perfect, I'm sure a big company can. Otherwise, what features would I like to see? Obviously, I'd love to see some kind of an SLR. Or I'd like to see a rangefinder, something with true manual focus with a way to dial it in. So I'd love to see a new SLR or a new rangefinder. I don't think we'll see an SLR anytime soon, because I believe it would just be prohibitively expensive. A lot of people have asked, can't they just precisely reverse engineer and produce the SX70 again? I'm sure you could, but it would be super expensive. I mean, the parts in this, I'm sure it would end up being like a $3,000 camera. These were not cheap. Not cheap to design, and although you technically could make modern recreations of everything, I think it would be prohibitively expensive. But yeah, otherwise, what features would I like to see? Not a lot, really. I mean, something like interchangeable lenses might be nice, but not super necessary and probably not even ideal unless it was an SLR. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's about it. I really think, truthfully, that we have like all the main features that you could ever expect. I just think it's about making the end usability better. So I think better menus, better app functionality, like the ability to precisely dial in an ISO to compensate for batches of film. And actually, probably more than what would I like to see in the cameras, I would like to see Polaroid put in more effort to make a database that helps users with like how to work their cameras. Like I know they have like troubleshooting parts on their website, and I know they have FAQ sections and that kind of stuff, and obviously their cameras come out with new manuals. But I think they really need to make it more obvious, and they need to put more emphasis on reading the manual before you actually use the product. Like, if I was designing a Polaroid camera, I would literally send it in from the box. Like, you would open it out of its box, and it would just be sealed with tape that just says, read the manual. And I would make it very precise, very to the point, very much in the style of Polaroid's early manuals, which were very heavy on pictures, very heavy on like just really, really insane levels of detail, very simple English, just how to get really, really good successful shots. And maybe just even doing like video like I do. I mean, I want to do a video all about the information contained in the original SX70 manual. But I think that they could do user videos in order to make their products easier to use. Like, just for example, getting Polaroid to do a video on troubleshooting film. Why do you get undeveloped patches? Why do you get magenta photos? Why do you get light leaks? Like that kind of stuff would be very, very handy to have done by Polaroid, so that you don't have to rely on like weird third parties to actually tell you this useful information. So I would like to see that. I would like to see a focus go back on the user and back on making the experience as easy to understand as possible, which is difficult to do. It is very, very difficult to do, and I'd like to see more effort put into that. Just effort into making things very intuitive and easy to use. Yeah, I think that's what I'd like to see. All right, next question. MIGRRR asks, not a question, but I just discovered your YouTube channel and I love it. Thank you. Thank you too for the comment. My love to you, right back at you. Next question. Am I building any more SX70 Sonars with manual controls? Yes. I'm always building them, but usually for clients. If you want an SX70 Sonar camera, I recommend you go and find one. Just like this client did, they sent me a gold Sonar. The client of mine that actually owns this does want to sell it, by the way, so if you're quick and you want a gold-plated SX70 Sonar with all the manual control PCBs, hit me up. If this video is 5 years old, the camera is probably long gone. It is not cheap, but it is a very, very smexy looking camera. But yeah, like I said, I just don't have any Sonars for sale. Unfortunately, because Sonars, the electronics in them are a thing that does die and snap and need replacing sometimes, my supply of Sonar shutters has been absolutely evaporated since probably about March. And so when I've been building new cameras, pretty much everything that I've been sent has either been a Model 3 or a Model 1 or a Model 2. So all the cameras that I've built that I've subsequently had offered for sale have all been one of those. I just simply haven't had any Sonar cameras come along. But yes, the SX70 Sonar with the manual control SX70R PCB, I would actually argue is probably the most versatile and feature-packed camera that you could possibly get, because it allows you to use external flashes, it allows you to use the dedicated dongle that clips on top, which I would show off right now, but I'm actually out of stock. I had to sell my personal one because the demand was so high. I'm currently waiting on a new batch to be produced. Yeah, they're really, really great. And I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that SX70 sonars are basically every bit as good as the SLR 680, if not better and more versatile. And I think a lot of people are starting to purchase them because 680s have become just so insanely expensive recently. And so I think there's been a real resurgence. I used to find it so difficult to sell sonar cameras because people thought they were ugly. I hated keeping sonars in stock back in the days. Like 5-6 years ago, if I had an SX70 sonar, I was like, oh, great. This is going to sit on my shelf for months. Everyone thought they were ugly. And I would get people ask me, they'd say, oh, can you remove the sonar? Can you convert it back into a standard model camera? All the time. It was like an ongoing thing. I hated them because if I got one in stock, if someone traded in one, I was like, great, I'm going to have this forever now. But I think actually people have come to realize that these represent an era of SX70, which was arguably the best in terms of manufacturing. They had like the best build quality versus least problems. And when you refurbish one, especially with the manual control PCB, I think these are arguably one of the best SX70s ever produced. And I think people are coming around to that. So as a result, I don't have any because they're just always sold out. And so many people send me sonars to refurbish and to repair that my parts supply just is constantly vaporized. But yes, I will always be building more. And if you want one, I highly recommend you send one in my way. Just buy a secondhand one from eBay and have me overhaul it from the ground up. El Iker asks, how did I get the idea to make YouTube videos? This is a very good question. I've wanted to do it for a long time. Long time. Back in 2020 when the pandemic started, I started streaming to Facebook on live. So my Facebook page, which is still my social media with the most followers, I just got out my phone, started, streaming to myself because we were in the middle of a pandemic. My other job, my full-time job, the hours got cut because, there was a dip in the economy, obviously, not as many people coming through. So I had a lot of extra time to spend at home and cameras to repair. And a lot of people, I think, were going through their cupboards, picking up their old broken Polaroids and sending them in. And sort of out of boredom and out of wanting something to do, I just decided, hey, you know what? What if I just repaired these things but did it live, like on the stream, and people could see their camera getting fixed in real time and interact and that kind of stuff. And it just really evolved from there. I ended up picking up a tremendous amount of extra business doing that. And people really liked the live streams. It got me noticed by Ben from In an Instant, and then I went on a podcast with him, and then I got invited on a podcast by Matt Loves Cameras. And it just sort of evolved from there. Initially, I never did it in terms of wanting the repair knowledge to be out there. I did it as a way to provide entertainment and a little bit of an extra bonus bit of content for my clients that were sending me something to be repaired. And the way that I saw it as kind of like, if you go to Chinatown, sometimes they got those Chinese restaurants where there's like a glass window booth at the front and you get to see them making the dumplings in real time. Because like, I don't know if you've ever tried to make a dumpling, there is an art to it, to doing it neatly and nicely. And so it's a bit of free promotion for the restaurant. I mean, they got to make the dumplings anyway. Why not put on a bit of a show and show off their skill at just how good they are at making dumplings? Because people find it fascinating to watch. And I was like, I could be like the dumpling guy, but for cameras. And that was sort of why I started doing it in the first place. My intention now in terms of YouTube is really, again, to be the dumpling guy, because I do feature sometimes very interesting repairs or repairs that were sent in to me by a client that I think then can become interesting content in and of itself. But really what I'm trying to do is just document, like what my mission statement is now is just trying to document all the repair information that I can on these cameras, because it is something that I believe got lost for several decades. When Polaroid sort of stopped producing the SX70, more and more repair centers shut down, and then as Polaroid changed hands, pretty much all the repair tools and shops and that kind of stuff, it just vaporized, and to the point where not a lot of people actually know how to service these things. Certainly when I started off repair, there was very little information out there. Although I do have copies of the repair manual, which maybe I'll get down and thumb through as I did in my last Q&A actually. I do have a physical copy of the repair manual. Although copies of these manuals do exist, they are just about useless. Like, they're kind of cool for learning the order of operation of things, but when it comes to actually fixing stuff, it's like, use the manual camera tester, and it like just assumes you have all this factory, calibration equipment. It's like, look, check the vertical and the horizontal alignment, and make sure the viewfinder is clear, and here are some other very specific tools that you're going to need. Like, it's useless. Like, this book is so the opposite of what is helpful. And so much of what I've had to do in terms of repairing Polaroid cameras has come as a byproduct of reverse engineering and of coming up with novel repair solutions that don't involve, factory parts, or I've had to figure out new ways of calibrating stuff, or new ways of, fixing rivets or fixing lens board lugs and all that kind of stuff. So what I figured I would do is make this information available for everyone so that this kind of knowledge doesn't get lost. And then the other thing that I wanted to do with YouTube is just, I guess, set the record straight on so many different aspects of Polaroid cameras, because, and I don't know if this will sound like something that's controversial, or I don't know if people are going to agree with me, but when I started off in photography, I started off in film photography, and I've been a member of a lot of different film photography groups over the years. But nothing quite compares to Polaroid in terms of online information that is just constantly wrong. And I think it's the byproduct of Polaroid cameras themselves being of a certain design. Like, a Polaroid camera, for the most part, unless we're talking about very specific professional-only models, a Polaroid camera is designed to be automatic. It is designed to spit the film out for you. It is designed to self-develop. It is designed to be used without realistically any settings involved other than make the picture lighter, make the picture darker. That is it. And as a result, I firmly believe that Polaroid cameras have a very low barrier to entry because of all that automation. And as a result, and I don't mean to sound condescending here, because I don't expect people to know this information, but the difference between, say, film photography and Polaroid photography is if you get handed, say, my Leica M5, you need to know what shutter speed does, you need to know what aperture does, you need to know how to manually focus, you need to know how to use the light meter, assuming it's even got batteries and that it works. You need to know every setting, you need to know the film ISO, you need to know how the thing behaves in order to use it. And that actually means you need a pretty solid theoretical framework before you're able to get a decent image. And so what I find is that because the entry level of knowledge required to use a film camera, especially a manual film camera, I'm not talking about point and shoots here, but I find the barrier of entry of knowledge required for a film camera is much higher than it is for a Polaroid camera. And as a result, I tend to find, and again, I'm not trying to be condescending here, it's just how it is. I tend to find people are not familiar as much with the theory of aperture and shutter speed and that kind of stuff as you would be in film photography. And as a result, you'll get a lot of people give bad advice or ask questions that otherwise would be self-evident to someone that knew more of the information. So for example, all you have to do is go on like Reddit, like r/Polaroid, or you go on like the SX70 Facebook group or something like that, and you are bound to every week or so end up with someone saying like, oh, I just got, my granddad's old chrome and tan SX70 and I tried to take this photo. Does anyone know why it's so blurry? And like you'll look at it and it's like, it's because they've taken a photo indoors without a flash with 160 ISO film and an f8 lens. But they don't know that because they're not familiar with film and speed and ISO and that kind of stuff. So what I'm trying to do with this YouTube channel is also provide people education in terms of how this kind of stuff works. For example, I just did an hour-long video on how the flash aperture mechanism works in an SX70 when you use a flash. I went in great detail as to, installing a flash, bridges 2 pins, and then depending on what you set the, what's the word that I'm looking for here? Depending on what you set the, oh my God, English failing me. Yeah, depending on what you set the distance to, it changes aperture. All little things like that. So, oh yeah, there we go. So just demonstrating that again. So yeah, if you guys want to know more information about that, I highly suggest you check that out. But yeah, there's so much information that is sort of unknown, or people that don't understand operations or how a camera works. And so you end up getting people giving each other advice on forums, and it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. And so what I wanted to do with my YouTube channel was just provide like as much correct information to the best of my ability. Like occasionally I'll say something wrong because a lot of what I produce is all single take type stuff. It's all sort of ad lib. I have absolutely no scripting. This is all just off the cuff, off the top of my head type of stuff. So occasionally even I will make a mistake, but I try and produce the most factually correct, specific Polaroid related information that I can, so as that the best knowledge gets out there. And what I really like to see is when I release a video, I start to notice people like repeating that same information. Like I did a video on the SX70 Model 3, a bit about the history and why it exists. And I started to notice after a few weeks, a lot of people repeating that information in forums. And I was like, wow, the information's actually spreading. It's getting out there. And people now have a better understanding of what this camera is and why it exists and why it's so weird. So yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to do this YouTube channel. It's to first of all show off my repair skills as a technician. That was the primary focus of it. But secondly, just to document this kind of repair information, because I mean, like I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I think like since the start of the year, I've released like 70 videos, which makes my channel the most in-depth recording of Polaroid-specific repair information that currently exists on the internet. So it's like, it is the #1 resource. And of course, things like the repair manuals exist, but as I said before, these actually aren't very helpful. They assume you've got a lot of factory gear. It's great for kind of learning the basics on how the cameras work, but it covers some basic stuff. It doesn't cover a lot of like the revisions that Polaroid did and why they swapped out certain parts. So I'm trying to fill in the blanks. And yeah, then it's just to try and educate people so that people have the best idea of Polaroid related knowledge. So yeah, good question. Thanks for asking. Hack an Instant asks, do I ever think I will tire of working with Polaroid cameras and get into something else? I mean, it's been like 13 years and it hasn't happened yet. No, truthfully, I love working on these things so freaking much. It doesn't feel like work. I just absolutely get into this like Zen zone when I do repair. It's a little bit different to when I'm doing like repair on a video where I'm having to explain myself. When I'm doing just repair and I'm not recording, I'm just in the zone, like having a ball, listening to music. I love it more than anything else, and I'm not really sure I'll ever get sick of it. Sometimes it gets a bit tedious, like if I have to do work on some cameras that are just like, totally bricked. But no, I don't really think so, especially when there are new opportunities to constantly have new things. I mean, there's new PCBs, new flashes coming out, there's new battery adapters coming out. Like, there's so many things that are constantly evolving in Polaroid land. There's new cameras coming out to cover and modify. Like, there's so much stuff. I think it's just always going to stay interesting. And if Polaroid, for example, like let's say the factory burnt down and everything vaporized overnight, I would probably try and get into repairing something else. Because I can repair other cameras, like I can repair Graflexes, and I'm very good at repairing the Mamiya C series. But at the moment, I don't offer those repairs professionally because I just simply don't have the time to do them. I'm so focused on Polaroids. But I may pivot to something else. But while the film is being produced, I'm just going to stick with Polaroid, I think. Evan B. Denton asks, when doing SX70 box camera repair, any tips on dealing with delaminating paper circuits? Yeah, you got two options. The first is glue. If you find yourself like a non-conductive glue, like something like Selly's Quick Grip, you can literally just glue the paper back together. And provided the glue isn't conductive, that's going to work totally fine. The other thing that you can do is get yourself some electrical Kapton tape and basically just tape the paper so that it sticks together. That's the best solution. Unfortunately, you will get delaminating circuits on any model Polaroid. It's just something that happens. But yeah, I've had great success gluing it back together and just making sure that none of the metal traces are touching. That works really well. And then when in doubt, Kapton tape is your friend. That was a very good and very specific question. On that subject, I do get a lot of random people from the general public ask me repair-related questions. I would like to ask, if you're going to do that, and truthfully, I don't mind helping someone who's having a hard time with repair, but please ask me a very specific question. Like Evan just did. That's a fantastic question because I know exactly what he's talking about. I know exactly the problem, and I can give him a very, very short and brief answer, and the whole exchange is done in seconds. What I don't like is people coming to me saying, "Hi, my SX70 doesn't work. Can I fix this?" Well, how the hell do I know? My general rule of thumb is if you have to ask, you probably shouldn't be doing it. It's like asking a mechanic, "Oh, my car doesn't start. Why?" Well, I don't know. Could be that it needs fuel. It might be this ignition is broken. The air filter might be clogged. Maybe it doesn't have an engine. Like maybe the battery's missing. Like, it could be so many things. It's literally impossible to diagnose. So yeah, if you are asking something like repair related, please avoid asking me things like, "Hi, my camera's randomly constantly ejecting the film. What could this be?" Because I can't help you with that question very quickly. And I just simply, like, it's nothing personal, but I'm very busy. I work 7 days a week fixing Polaroid cameras. I just don't have the time to spend hours troubleshooting every possible scenario that could possibly be causing your camera's issue. Because saying your SX70 shutter doesn't work, I mean, shit, that could literally be 1,000 different things, right? And it's just not possible. Unless I had the camera in front of me, it's not possible to help you troubleshoot that kind of stuff. And additionally to that, I already have videos showing how to fully overhaul and repair an SX70, where if you follow along with that, you'll probably be able to fix your camera. So yeah, I don't mind people asking me repair questions, but if you could keep it as specific as possible, that really helps me out. Otherwise, I will very likely just ignore your question or say that I can't help you. And again, that's not personal. I'm not trying to be a douchebag here, but these are very complex cameras, and I just simply don't have the time. Like, I don't mind you asking questions, but please keep them as specific as possible. I'm not trying to be a douchebag here. It's just that it takes a lot of time to diagnose stuff if you ask me a very open-ended question like my camera won't fire at shutter versus something very, very specific. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Otherwise, like I said, I'm simply too busy. I'll very likely just either straight up ignore the question or just tell you that I can't help, and it's not the kind of service that I do. Because yeah, it's just, you might not realize it, but it's just too open-ended, and it's going to be way too hard for me to diagnose every single issue. Next question. Zebra Wolf says, I realize the mirror flips the image, but could you mod an SX70 to take Instax? I don't want to say anything is impossible. But what you're asking would be very, 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 very difficult to do. For several reasons. The first of which is exactly what you just said. So Polaroid exposes an image from the front of the photo. Instax exposes from the back of a photo. So when you expose Instax film, you will end up with an image that gets mirrored because Polaroid cameras have a mirror inside. In the SX70, it flips up and down, but Polaroid cameras have a mirror that flips the image. So first of all, that would be a problem, which you already identified. Second of all is the images are completely different sizes. So even Instax Square, which is the same kind of format as Polaroid film, it's only like a fraction of the size, like it's probably only the size of the image itself, so it's a lot smaller. And that presents a whole host of challenges. First being that the pick arm wouldn't be able to reach and pull the film forwards far enough. The roller pressure used by an SX70 will also likely have a hard time exposing for Instax because they're different thicknesses. So that could present challenges. The film is also different ISOs. So the camera would need to be calibrated for 800 ISO instead of 640 or 160. So you would need to, like, let's say it was a stock PCB, you would need to use a different kind of capacitor mod than otherwise would already be used. So you'd need to use like 100 picofarad capacitor to get the ISO of the film to expose correctly. What you would basically need to do is completely re-engineer the base of the camera. So you would actually need to put like some kind of motorized ejection system in place of where the film cartridge goes. So, like I said, it's technically not impossible, but it would require so much re-engineering of the camera that it would not really be economically feasible, because I don't think anyone would want to spend thousands of dollars on a camera where the image is flipped. So, personally, I just don't think it's going to happen. What I do think people are better off doing is investing in SLR-based systems like the NONs, which is dedicated for Instax film. But yeah, simply put, there's just way too many engineering hurdles. Like I said, it's technically not impossible, but I never see it happening in my lifetime on a scale that makes it into production. I think people could quite easily come up with a one-off, but to do it as a product that you could then put into production and sell, I personally never see it happening. But good question. Agatha Asnow asks, which instant camera has the best lens and best picture quality and has the most versatile shutter speed / app combo? I did a whole video on this comparing an SX70 Sonar to the Polaroid i2. And yeah, I would say basically either of these. So either the Polaroid i2 or any kind of SX70. And I do mean any SX70 because every single SX70 has the exact same lens, 4-element glass, Tessar design. If you put the SX70R manual control PCB, you basically get the same level of features. You get manual exposure, you get remote shutter release. Either one is going to be good. My vote goes for the SX70 though, being that they are much more repairable than the Polaroid i2. There's simply just way more options out there in terms of fixing these and keeping them going. And I personally just like an SLR over a viewfinder camera, but the Polaroid i2 from a technological standpoint definitely has the most features. They are great cameras. Optically, it is amazing. No manual focus, and prior to at least the latest rollout of firmware, the auto exposure is notoriously wonky and just not good at exposing, but on manual mode, these work really well. So yeah, my choice would be any SX70, which has been overhauled and installed with the new SX70R manual control Bluetooth PCB, or the Polaroid i2. Those are the best cameras on the market right now, hands down. Mihai Alexava asks, do I use any other film camera formats? Yes. Yes, I do. I haven't really done much shooting since moving back to Western Australia on accounts of trying to find a house and not having the space and not having the time because I've been so busy and starting the business. But yeah, I have a Leica M5 with a whole host of Zeiss ZM glass. I have a Canon A1 with a whole bunch of lenses, and I have a Mamiya C220, which is a twin lens reflex camera, which I have a whole bunch of lenses for, including some custom-made lenses. I have a set of 80mm f2.8 lenses from a Zeiss planar, from a Rolleiflex. So the Zeiss planar 80mm f2.8 from a Rolleiflex 2.8D. I purchased 2 broken Rolleiflexes to harvest for parts, and I actually installed the lens elements on the Mamiya C220, and that thing is an absolute beast of a camera. So yes, I do shoot a lot of other formats. If you ever want to see any of my photos, I suggest that you scroll all the way down on my Instagram page. These days, I typically just post pictures of cameras that I've refurbished because it's more of a business page. But when I first started my Instagram page, it was more for my photography. So if you just do a lot of scrolling, you'll see some of my photography if you ever want to check it out. I don't think I'm the best photographer in the world. In fact, I think I am very mediocre, but I do enjoy shooting other formats of film too. I just haven't done it in a while because it was very hard to do it through COVID, and just with the move and everything going on in my life, I haven't had as much time to go shooting as I otherwise would have liked. But yeah, good question. Developing Colin asks, can I take a button from a Pronto Sonar and put it into a 660 so that you can have cable release? I have no idea. I would say no, because the buttons are of a different shape and a different design. I don't see it working. I'm just imagining how the sliding mechanism works in my head. I don't think so. The way that a 660 or any other kind of box type 600 camera works, you've got the main flash trigger and then you've got the secondary one. The main trigger on the side is to take a photo with flash. The secondary disengages the flash and takes ambient exposures. There's actually nothing inside that's like a sliding mechanism. So even if you drilled a hole and put a cable release, it wouldn't actually do anything. You would actually probably need to put something like in front of the shutter button that would then physically push onto it. I just don't think it's possible. Yeah, I don't think that it would work. Certainly, if you're willing to send me both of those cameras, I can try. But I think the answer will be no. But yeah, good, very niche question. But yeah, I'm happy to try if you want to send me two. So send me a Pronto Sonar and send me a box type camera, and I can see if I can make it work. But I don't reckon I'll be able to. Stefan Pochers asks, how long should I use my SX74 refurbished before I get it refurbished again? Well, that is a classic how long is a piece of string question. The answer is it really depends on how often you use it. I've discussed at length before, one of the main reasons that SX70s need to be serviced is not just simply because of time, because wear and tear obviously is a factor. It does exist, and it is a very real reason as to why you should have a camera serviced. However, the two bigger reasons is design flaws and cost reduction. Early model cameras came out of the factory very half-baked with a whole bunch of design flaws that end up inevitably bricking these cameras. And later models, for every revision that they fixed, seem to introduce a new problem in the form of cost reduction, such as weaker mirror, silicon that causes the mirrors to drop, rivets instead of screws, poor quality rivets, poor quality solder, the list goes on. So once I've refurbished an SX70 camera, from a mechanical and electronic standpoint, especially if we're talking upgrading it with the new SX70R PCB, truthfully, if you look after it, it should last decades. I mean, I give a 1-year limited warranty, but I shouldn't really need to see one come back my way ever. And it very rarely ever happens. The only cameras that I ever see come back to me is because a client has damaged them somehow. Once they are serviced, they should pretty much continue to work. And the only way that you're going to need it serviced again, really, is if you wear it out, like for example, you shoot in places that involve a lot of dust and sand and it gets into the camera, or if you drop it. All right, Matt Applegate asks, what is the coolest part about living in Australia? In my opinion, Australia being where I live and where I am from. I feel like not a lot of people, like unless you've been to Australia, because we're kind of isolated from the rest of the world, I don't think people truly understand what it's like to actually live here. It's a remarkably interesting place. Culture-wise, we're a very young country. I mean, the country was only, discovered by, Western settlers in the late 1700s, and only, I think, founded, like, as the Australia we know it today, like with the different states and territories, I think in like 1901 or something like that. So as a country, like we're realistically only 100 or so years old, 123 years old or whatever it is. And that means we don't really have a lot of history. I mean, even a place like America, which is also a relatively young country if you compare it to something like Europe, unless you're talking about the indigenous societies there, there's not a lot of written history. And if you compare it to somewhere, say, like in Asia or in Europe. And as a result, we don't really have, the hundreds and thousands of years of culture outside of the local Aboriginal population. And so as a result, a lot of what is modern Australia borrows very heavily from other cultures. So, we are a former British colony, or I guess still are a British colony. And so a lot of our culture is based on Britain, but we've had a lot of American influence over the years. We had a lot of influence from Italian migrants and Greek migrants throughout the 1960s. There was some Japanese migration in the early 1900s, and it's sort of this weird melting pot of a lot of different cultures and cuisines and nationalities that all sort of come to make this place really, really great. So, it's an interesting place to live because the food is amazing. Like, we can grow a lot of our own produce here. Culturally, it's really diverse. And the same goes with landscapes. I mean, I used to live in Victoria, which has mountains where it snows in the wintertime. which a lot of people don't sort of realize. A lot of people just assume Australia is one gigantic desert, which is true for the most part, being the red center of the country. But around the coast, there's a lot of different and widely variable landscapes. We've got everything from temperate forests to tropical rainforests to harsh deserts to wetlands. Everything is really, really vast. And yeah, just in terms of like the wildlife that's here and the scenery, it's really unlike anything else you'll experience anywhere else in the world. It's really, really unique, especially the southwest of Australia, which is an area that I like to visit if I go on vacation within Australia. And it's an area that I grew up a lot around. Totally unique, like coastline and flora and fauna that live down there. It's really, like when you're down there, it doesn't look like any other part of Australia, if you know what I mean. And so, yeah, Australia is just a really cool place because it's just so damn different. It's such a unique place to live. There's a lot that we get wrong, but I like to think that for the most part, we've taken like a lot of sort of the best bits of many aspects of Western society and adopted it. I really rate it. Like, it's a nice place to live. It does have its flaws. For example, especially where I live in Perth, the public transport is abysmal. A lot of Australia, other than sort of Melbourne and Sydney, which are the two very, very big major city centres over in the eastern states that a lot of people know about in terms of the outside world, a lot of that has like good public transport because they were very old cities. They kind of were founded predating the like era where everyone owned a car. But a lot of the rest of Australia, just given its vastness and the fact that it takes a long time to drive from one place to another, Australia is a place that is very reliant on cars. And it suffered greatly from the fact that because we've got so much abundance of minerals and things that we can mine, there was no like incentive to build upwards. Everything just kind of sprawled out. And so I think one of the worst parts about Australia is you just have to drive everywhere. I think it's kind of like America in a lot of that regard, in that, unless you're talking about city centers that were specifically designed with public transport in mind, such as New York, which I've been to, and the public transport there and the subway system is very, very awesome. It's just like, you need a car to survive here. And there's like, it's just not super friendly to get around, especially in Perth. It does exist, but like it takes ages and you've got to plan well ahead in advance. So I guess those are some of the things I like about Australia and some of the things that I don't like. But I highly recommend everyone come and visit at least once. It is just an utterly unique place to live. Everything about the country is super unique, through to what is modern Australia culture, through to ancient Australia indigenous culture, through to our flora, fauna, wildlife, landmarks. It's just a really awesome place to live. I haven't traveled to everywhere, obviously, but I've been throughout a lot of places in Europe. I've been to America. I've been through some of Southeast Asia. And other than sort of Japan, which I truly visited that place and went, wow, they're living in the year 3000. I think Australia sort of has the best overall of all those little, they take the best parts of all the other countries that I just mentioned. It's a really cool place to be. Next question. Kay Dignam asks, what is my favorite camera I've ever made for a customer and why? I think that's really hard to answer. I've made a lot of really nice cameras for a lot of clients. And that's kind of like asking what my favorite child is. They're all wonderful in their unique, in their own unique ways. There's elements that I like about every single custom build that I've ever done, whether it's just from this, crudely battery modified Polaroid i2 through to, the luxury of like this gold Sonar with the croc skin. I've made a lot of really cool peel apart cameras back in the day that were all custom with various different lenses and shutters. I've made some really colorful cameras. But yeah, I don't think I necessarily have one individual favorite. But each of them, like when someone comes to me with a specific idea, especially if it's something that I haven't necessarily done before, it's a color combo that I haven't done, or I'm doing something unique, I always appreciate being given that opportunity to make something that's really, really awesome. One camera that does spring to mind is my friend Ashley's Polaroid 1-600. Which is the one that it all sort of started because I promised her that like I was going to upgrade the camera, and she basically gave me unlimited creativity in terms of how I would do it. And that camera was not only cool because I think that the sticker bomb design that I did on it was just really eye-catching. It is not something that I ever want to do again. I thought, oh yeah, slapping some stickers on something would be nice and quick and easy. Boy, was I wrong. Took way too long to do. Never want to have to do it again. But the cool thing about that camera is the lithium-ion battery mod that I installed on that 1-600 would later become the basis for my PolarVolt mod, which I've now made open source and installed on so many SX70s. And if I hadn't have done that camera, I may not have ever invented the PolarVolt battery solution. So yeah, maybe that one is my favorite because of what it then led me to go on to do. And since I actually did the video on her camera, I actually modified the way that it works. So instead of having the buck converter inside the camera with a little on-off toggle switch, I've actually redesigned it so that much like my PolarVolt, you know, when you erect the camera, it turns it on. And when you collapse it, it turns it off because it recycles the hinge switch inside the camera. I wired up hers in the exact same way now, so all you've got to do to turn on her 1-600 is pop it open, and all you've got to do to turn it off is close it, and it's as easy as that. So yeah, I don't know, maybe that's my favorite because it allowed me to invent something that I could then go on to give back to the Polaroid community and create so that I could then offer an I-type solution to all of my clients for a very affordable price, and an I-type solution that is, you know, as I've mentioned in all the videos, is completely open source, is made using entirely off-the-shelf components. It is something that can be installed to any SX70 and 1-600. And it's something that is super repairable, super modular, and super customizable, and something that can, just provide future longevity to these things for years to come. But yeah, really good question. Thanks for asking that, Kay. Let's see what is next. Actually, another one from Kay. He sent me two at once. He says, what's the worst camera I've ever received in general? Man, so many. The last 2 months, I have just been like so cursed with people sending me like the most beat up, crappy, just fried cameras that I've ever seen. From all sorts of sources, from people that have bought them from respected online retailers, from people that purchased them from eBay under the guise that they were refurbished, from people that just picked them up at yard sales and they were super moldy and disgusting and corroded inside. The ability for someone to send me a camera that is just completely, like, just so far beyond like what is considered even worth refurbishing. I think I'm yet to ever have, I'm yet to have ever met the final end. Like, I don't know how bad it would have to be for me to turn it around, but certainly I came close, and I actually did turn one away just the other day that, like, it was just oxidized and all the mirrors would toast, as was the lens. And it was just to the stage where I was like, it's not economically viable for me to repair this anymore because it would just become a ship of Theseus. But another two that I got sent, I had a client, I'm just going to dive into a box here and grab them out. I haven't finished with these yet because I'm waiting on the new OpenSX70 PCBs to arrive, but What you see here is going to be one white SLR 680 and one gold SLR 680, both using Polar Studio battery adapters. I've got brand new housings for them. These are going to be very, very nice cameras. But these cameras that I've made these bodies out of, this is 5 cameras that you see here that have gone into producing just these 2 bodies, because all of them were just appalling condition, like so beat up, so smashed. Like the gold camera specifically, it actually has a broken front door, which the client is going to attempt to glue and repair with some gold leaf. So I'm leaving that for him. But it also had a broken viewfinder. So this little panel here, where the little pin goes through, was completely snapped off, and the viewfinder was just wobbling around. And I'm actually very proud of this fix, because unless you really knew what you were looking for, it's so hard to tell that this has been repaired. Basically what I had to do, where the hinge pin goes into the side, I drilled a hole in the housing, and then I used solenoid wire. I basically rested the pin where it should sit. I wrapped tightly solenoid wire around where the pin went until it formed the loop that the pin was supposed to travel through, because the loop had completely smashed off. And basically what I did, I then soldered all the solenoid wire together so that it was basically a metal chunk. And then I covered the entire thing in JB Weld and let it dry for 24 hours. Then I sanded it back until it was nice and smooth. And then I painted it so that it's as strong as the original. And you really cannot tell that it was ever broken. So, but yeah, that required a ton of work just for me to get that operational. So yeah, I would definitely say that like these were these were some of the worst cameras I've ever seen, but I really have seen it all. I've seen so many cameras that were just so destroyed that I can't even keep up. Like there's not even any one that sticks out in my mind anymore, because I just see them so regularly. But the ones that really annoy me is when the camera has been purchased from someone that has described it being in better condition than it actually is. That really annoys me, because I hate people getting ripped off. And there are just so many cowboy resellers out there that are unscrupulous and, just totally untrustworthy, that shouldn't be selling stuff. And, they're getting away with just basically passing off junk as refurbished to those that don't know any better. And I hate seeing that happen. And I've done videos like that in the past. Just go through my channel and you'll find some. All right, Silly Ghosts asked, Mint versus Retrospekt, the cameras themselves and their repairs. Do I have any opinions on them? I think what Silly Ghost is perhaps asking is, what do I think of Retrospekt and Mint's repair ability, and what do I think of the cameras that they sell? This is a very difficult question for me to answer, because there is an obvious bias and no way for me to answer that without a bias, because I run a channel and a company, and have done for the last decade or so, dedicated to fixing cameras, including SX70s and 600s and things like that. I can vouch for my own work. And if you guys want to see the kind of work that I put into cameras, well, you have this channel. It's very transparent. You can see all the work that I put in. You can see the kind of things that I do. And that is basically the standard that I do on every single camera. I don't do as needed repairs anymore. I only do full overhauls from the ground up, where I am basically stripping a camera to the chassis, like you just saw with those 2 gold and white camera bodies. And I rebuild it from the ground up. And it is, as a result, impossible for me to comment on the work that's been done on a camera that I haven't personally done. It's just, I can't, like, unless that camera is in front of me and I'm looking at it, I just cannot make a comment on whether it's done good or not. Because the truth is that, yes, I've seen cameras come my way from other refurbishers. I've certainly repaired cameras from Retrospekt before. I've repaired cameras from Mint before. I've repaired cameras from Brooklyn Film Camera before. I've repaired cameras from Chromatic Parts. I've repaired cameras from Japanese eBay. I've repaired cameras from other online UK-based refurbishers. And, you know, all those cameras that came my way were either for upgrades or they were there for needing something repaired. But there is a bias that exists. Like when I'm seeing a camera that's been sent to me from another company that has an issue, well, I'm only ever going to see the cameras that have issues, if that makes sense, because that's what I do. I repair and I upgrade cameras. So it's highly unlikely someone's going to send me a perfectly refurbished, pristine example of an SX70 unless they're just getting me to double check it, in which case I'm probably going to end up charging a full overhaul price anyway because it requires so much effort. So there is that bias in that because I'm doing repairs, I'm only ever going to see the bad examples, and everyone makes mistakes. Like that's just the truth of the matter. That's why I have a warranty, because even I am human. In fact, on that subject, I have this camera here. This camera was one I refurbished back in January for a client of mine named David Gonzalez. And this camera actually had an intermittent problem. This camera, I'll just dive into a bit of history here. This camera is from 1976. It has a hybrid PCB, so basically the final generation of Model 1/2 PCBs before they released the Alpha. So it's a transitional model. And this camera suffers from mid-cycle shutdown. And this affects some PCBs. It's a very rare problem, fortunately. And it's basically a condition whereby if you put in a very, very fresh pack of film, something that's like, you know, straight out of the pack, a very fresh pack of film, the battery isn't always exactly 6 volts. Sometimes it's more like 6.1, 6.2 volts. And in this particular camera, when you use a very fresh pack of film and it has more than 6.1 volts, the shutter will not fire properly. It cycles and does everything like it appears to be working, but what happens, the integration cycle never activates. Now, this was never apparent to me because I test all of my cameras using I-type film. So I usually have battery adapters that I test cameras with. And it worked totally fine. And even for David, when he got the camera, it worked totally fine until he tried some fresher packs of film that were more in date and brand new. And then he started getting blank photos. And that is because this particular camera, its chip problem was intermittent. It only happened over 6.1 volts, so you had to get sort of unlucky and get a pack where the batteries were, you know, slightly overvolted. And yeah, he was getting blank black photos. Now, I have subsequently fixed this camera by installing a smoothing capacitor on the back of the PCB. Oh, hello. What's going on with the light exposure here? Yeah, there you go. What the heck? Stupid auto exposure. What was I saying? Yeah, so what I did, first of all, I took the whole shutter off the camera. Luckily, I didn't have to go open the insides. I had to flip the PCB off. I reflowed all the connections just to make sure it wasn't like a bad trace. That didn't help. And then what I actually ended up doing was putting a capacitor in between ground and in between positive voltage on the shutter. And what that does is it smooths the ripple effect that is caused by the DC motor spinning. So basically when a DC motor spins, it introduces a ripple into the circuit. And that ripple above 6.1 volts can be problematic for SX70s, and it can cause the integration cycle not to work. Now, I believe that this has now subsequently fixed the problem, and I've been able to do so because it was just a capacitor. I've been able to do so basically with no extra charge. So what I'm going to try and do here, I'm just going to get a pack of film and I'll just see if I can find one that has, 6.17 volts. So this is a very fresh pack of film. And yeah, we can see the shutter is now working as it should. And this was something that I just simply missed. Now, truthfully, that was a very, very easy problem to miss because I did film test this thing, except the battery adapter that I was using outputted slightly less than the 6.1 volts that was causing this thing to fail. So basically, if David happened to get lucky and he used packs of film that had close to 6 volts, he got a camera that worked. But if he got a new pack of film that was slightly overvolted, which can just happen, it's just how lithium chemistry works, he had a camera that didn't work. So I missed it, but it was easy to miss. Fortunately, it was easy to rectify with the smoothing capacitor. And he now has a working camera that I can send back to him. And just to prove it, I'm going to film test this a little later today. But that is what I'm trying to say, is that people can make mistakes. And if someone had received this camera from me, they might have assumed that I didn't know how to test something. But on the other hand, with that said, I always send people, when they buy a camera from me, like the photo at the very start of this video, I send people test photos to prove that I've actually gone and serviced their camera. So every single time I service your camera, sometimes it ends up being featured on a video like this. So there you go, David. And I'll probably do a video on that subject separate to this in the future to document that as a repair, because that is actually a repair that Polaroid knew about. It does not affect every PCB. It's to do with the chips in the PCB being a slightly lower quality, and that happens when you're making silicon chips on a mass scale. Sometimes you get some that just don't behave as well as the others. And that was an official, documented, Polaroid-sanctioned repair method. So I was able to implement that, and now his camera works. But what I'm trying to say, if you had got that from me, you might have gone, oh yeah, that Jake guy, he's full of crap, he doesn't know how to fix something. When it was simply just an intermittent issue, which anyone could have missed. So yeah, I don't really like commenting too much on the overall ability of someone's repair. All that I can really say is my preferred way of doing business is with someone, more like me, right? Which is to say that who you're speaking to when you send off the camera is the person that's going to be doing the work. And that is simply because when you do that, there's less chance that things are going to go wrong. And you know who you're speaking to directly. You've got a direct line to the repairer. If they find something major, they can contact you straight away. I generally recommend, if you're really concerned about getting the best possible service, do so with someone that you're going to have a direct line to. Not to say that other technicians out there that don't do that are going to inherently be bad. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's just that that's how I prefer to have stuff done. Because otherwise I feel like it ends up being this bureaucracy where you're emailing someone and then they're acting like a middleman, let me go ask the technician, and now I got to go ask the person responsible for shipping. And it's just it's a little bit messy. Typically smaller, more personalized operations is my preference. But yeah, I really don't like commenting too much in sweeping, generalized strokes. Certainly if I do a video and I find a camera refurbished by someone else, I'm going to point out things that I think maybe could have been better, if that camera has a fault, or I'll point out things that are why the camera was faulty. For example, the video I did on the Japanese SX70, which had a hole in the bellows. I made a whole bunch of comments on how that person could have improved and how they could have prevented it from happening in the first place. And my commentary is really meant, and I hope people don't take it in the wrong way, but I'm not trying to bash other people's skills. I'm just trying to show how it could be improved for the next time. And I hope that comes across in my videos. And I've actually got a few videos which will be coming out soon over the next few weeks, which are going to dive into that. So I've got another one from another country. I won't spoil anything. Not a country, another company. I won't spoil anything, but that was a camera where I found a whole bunch of problems. It just straight up didn't work when the client received it. The drive shaft spring was actually slipping on the motor. And it took me, I had to basically strip the whole thing down and rebuild it from the ground up. And with that particular example, I just don't think it was necessarily film tested. I think they did everything else acceptably, with the exception of a few little nitpicky things that didn't actually affect the functioning of the camera. It's mainly cosmetic. But it just became apparent that for whatever reason it wasn't film tested, because if they'd film tested it, they would have known straight away within seconds that the drive shaft was slipping. But yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question. Like I said, I don't want to develop this reputation as the guy who criticizes everyone else's repair methods. But what I do want is everyone to be doing the best possible job testing cameras, ensuring that they're in the best operational condition as much as possible before they get sent out, so as to make clients as happy as possible. Because I genuinely believe that there are a lot of repairers out there right now which are just doing like a slapdash bare minimum, which is just not cool. But yeah, I don't want to name names or anything like that, because I don't want the drama. But B, I too was a lousy technician when I started off. Like, I've only got the level of skill that I have because of oodles of practice and trial and error. So yeah, I hope that answers that question. I hope that's not a soft politician answer. But yeah, I mean, look, to be honest, like, you can make your own decisions. Like, ask online on forums, get feedback. Like, if you're not sure of someone's skill level or if they've dealt with them, ask the people directly. Ask what their experiences are. Ask them to show you photos along the way, like that kind of stuff. And make up your own decision as to who you think would be the best at servicing your camera. Because like I said, I think someone like myself is pretty open and transparent. You can make your own decisions. All right. Lance Weeks asks, what film lab is my favorite? Well, Lumina Labs, as I mentioned at the start of the video. So my friend John's lab would certainly get the tick of approval from me. Otherwise, I used to use Michael's a lot back in Melbourne before it shut down. Otherwise, I have used Halide Supply. They were very, very good. And those were the labs that I used the most, so which are all Australian labs, by the way. So Michael's is close, so no point mentioning them now. But Halide Supply, very good. Love the guys there. Hi, Emil, if you're watching. And yeah, because those people are all very good, I haven't needed anyone else. But yeah, if you want someone that's a single-man operation giving you that personal touch, yeah, check out my friend John at Lumina Labs. If you want just a different alternative, if you want to mail him in some film to get developed, I highly recommend you do so. Crook and Flail asks, best tips for storing film and cameras when they're loaded. Should they stay flat? Yeah, definitely an SX70 when it's loaded with film, you absolutely must store it in the flat condition, store it collapsed, like this is right now. If I catch you leaving your SX70 on display like this, especially with film in it, I will find you. I will track you down, I will find out where you live, and I will visit you, and I will slap you. Because this is absolutely one of the worst things that you can do to an SX70. The first thing, when you leave film in here, the erect position is basically the power on position. So you're putting a constant 6-volt load on the camera's PCB, which will prematurely age the electronics. Second thing, you expose the rubber bellows, which then, through exposure with UV light, and being in that stretched position, will start to shrink, and that will affect the way that the camera collapses. And the third thing that you're doing, you leave the viewfinder assembly wide open for collecting dust. And that is the easiest way that you can make yourself have a dim viewfinder. Dust will basically collect on the bellows underneath and in the viewfinder pieces and on the wafer lens, and it will result in your viewfinder going dim. You absolutely must always store the camera collapsed. And in terms of film, if you're going to be leaving film for a very long period of time, keep it in the fridge. If you're going to be shooting it within 6 months or so, you don't need to. Just store it like a bottle of wine somewhere cool and dry. Simple as that. A lot of people get really freaking paranoid that you need to like keep it refrigerated 24/7. No, you don't. Refrigerating is annoying anyway because it introduces potential problems when it thaws. Because the backside of a Polaroid photo becomes sticky when wet. And this black bit of plastic, and you can try it for yourself, wet it, and you'll actually be able to like stick photos together doing that. And so what happens is if you store your film in the fridge and you pull it out and it's very hot, moisture can condense inside and it can actually stick your photos together and you'll get a pack that won't eject properly. And that is especially true if you've got something being stored on your film, kind of pushing down onto it. The combination of that cold condensation plus moisture can stick your film together. So I generally don't bother with refrigerating my film at all. I mean, I use so much film in terms of testing clients' cameras. It never sits around long enough for me to warrant putting it in a refrigerator. I generally recommend to people, if you have a brick and mortar store that you can visit, such as an Officeworks here in Australia or a JB Hi-Fi, go in and just buy your film locally and buy it when you shoot it, like buy it as you need. Doing so, first of all, encourages local stores to keep it in stock. And second of all, it encourages a fresh rotation of film. There's no point buying oodles of film and hoarding it away like it's the end of the Earth apocalypse, because that's going to encourage film stores to only sell film in batches. A constant, fresh supply is going to be better for every person. So yeah, just buy it as you need it. Get it as fresh as you can, and I wouldn't worry about refrigerating it too much unless you're, going to fly away for a year and work remotely and you won't be with your camera. So, you want it to work when it comes back, then you can refrigerate your film. But otherwise, I wouldn't bother. I think people put way too much thought into and are way too anally retentive on the thought of refrigerating their film. You really don't need to, as long as it's stored somewhere cool and dry. Obviously, don't put it in a heat, like a hot cupboard somewhere, or store it in the boot of your car if you live in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm not saying that. But, somewhere like a basement or a cupboard that's cool and dry is going to be totally fine. You don't necessarily need to refrigerate it, but it is a good idea if you live somewhere ridiculously hot. Katie Gregoriou, I hope I pronounced that all right, says, which parts would I swap out to create my ideal SX70 camera and why? I covered this in my first Ask Me Anything. And instead of answering it again, I'm going to do a shameless plug into the video that you should watch instead. So go and watch that. I discuss at length my personal cameras, which are made from a Frankenstein's collection of parts. Really cool stuff. I highly recommend you watch the first AMA. Silly Ghosts asks another question. They say, frog tongue on an SX70, yes or no? For me, I don't use it. I've never found a need to, and I've also done a video showing why you don't need to. Personally, because they were never designed for a frog tongue, I feel that they just get in the way. They stop the camera from folding down nicely. They're just more trouble than they're worth. And if you really want a frog tongue, get an old Polaroid photo, put it above the rollers, push it through, boom. You now have a frog tongue, which you can remove. Super easy. And as that ejects, you basically grab two at the same time. I did a whole video explaining how to do that. But yeah, the truth is, if you know how to shoot an SX70 using the techniques that I show in that video, you do not need a frog tongue. On a 600 camera, yeah, absolutely, because they were designed like the i2 is, and like the Polaroid Job Pro that I was showing off earlier in the video. These were designed to have a frog tongue. Absolutely, I recommend you buy one for a 600. But on an SX70, personally, I feel they just get in the way. Monochrome Blues responded to my question and said, if the Mamiya C220 is the best camera, what lenses would I recommend? Wide angle question mark. Yeah, as I mentioned before in terms of the other cameras that I have, my Mamiya is not with me at the moment. It is in storage. Again, see housing crisis. But the Mamiya is great because you can make custom-made lenses for it. Any size 0 lens cell you can adapt and fit to the pre-existing shutter. So that means that I've got lenses that are like Tomanon 105mm f4.5. I've got Zeiss Novenar 110mm f4.5. I have 80mm f2.9 triplet Schneider Radionars. I've got the 80mm f2.8 planar design from the Rollei Flex 2.8. But any of the Mamiya C series lenses are all excellent. Like Mamiya did not slouch on a single one of those lenses. The 55mm wide angle is phenomenal. It's quite expensive, but I highly recommend you track one down because they are just so much fun to use. You really can't go wrong. All the lenses are total bangers on the C series, and most importantly, they are interchangeable. So if one of them ever gums up, you're not stuck without a lens having to send the whole camera away for a service. You can use another lens in the meantime. Highly recommend it. The best TLR series ever made, hands down, and I will fight you if you say otherwise. There is simply nothing better than them. And I don't care about Rollei Flexes because you can put Rollei lenses on a C220. Andrew asks, if I could change one single thing about the modern Polaroid hobby, what would it be? Oh, I think I answered this a little earlier in the video, but I will go on and talk about it again. And what I would do if I could be president and change one thing, I would force everyone to read this before they use their cameras, especially for SX70s, because so much of online forums and Reddit and so many of people that contact me with questions can all find the answers they seek by reading the manual. And I don't mean to sound condescending. I don't mean to sound like a douchebag, but holy moly, I wish people would just read the manual. It literally tells you all the answers. This manual is so filled with tips and tricks and just all kinds of cool stuff that will make your photography so much better. Like it's just, this is like the best, most underutilized piece of literature. And the SX70 manual, like you can find copies of them online. I highly recommend if you can't find the manual for like a standard camera, just read the manual for the SX70 Sonar because it's the final SX70. It contains all the best information, and anything that's like the autofocus that just isn't relevant to earlier cameras, you can just ignore. But all the other information is going to be identical. But yeah, I get so much of these forums are just clogged up by people going like, oh, do you have any tips and tricks? Any, like I just got an SX70. What do you recommend? Like, what should I do to get the most out of it? Just, like, they already covered this back in the 70s. Like, they already provided you with the tips and tricks. Read the damn manual. And I think on that note, like a lot of people just don't know that you can Google the manual for basically anything. It doesn't matter what product it is. And I just think that genuinely people don't, they don't know that you can. But I'm here to say, like, if this is something that you've never realized, if you have a product, like, unless it is something insanely obscure, made by a really small batch company in very low quantities, odds are, if you have a camera like, this Leica M5, or the i2, or an SX70, or basically any camera, any piece of electronics, a Walkman, a cassette deck, a VHS player, a turntable. If you do not know how it works, Google the product name, manual.pdf, and you will find it. I can just about guarantee someone has sat there, painstakingly scanned in the images and archived it for other people to see. The internet is amazing. It is filled with this kind of stuff. And if you do a bit of Googling, I'm sure that you'll find just about anything that you want to know. But yeah, I mean, I really do mean this. Like I said, I hope I'm not coming across as being too condescending. But basically all the questions that are constantly asked online have already been answered 50 years ago. Daylight pictures, how to get success with photos outdoors, how the light dark control works, taking pictures in hot and cold weather. Like, this is stuff that still comes up again and again. And I'm like, dude, Polaroid already told you how to do this 50 years ago. Like, if you Google the manual, you'll find this information in literature. And yeah, I think it's just because, like, current generations just don't know that you can get this information for free online. And I don't know if it's like some people are just too lazy to Google information on their own. They want, like, someone to spoon feed it to them for them. But, like, if you have something and you want to know how it works, like, the original literature, odds are it is out there. Now, if it's not out there, odds are someone's done a video on how to use it on YouTube, even if it's small and only has a few views. And if neither of those exists, someone's probably written a blog post on how it works, or a post on Reddit on how it works, and you can very likely find the information that you seek. But yeah, that's probably one thing I would just change about the Polaroid hobby in general. And it goes back to what I was saying. I think it becomes, because these things were designed to be so, like, easy to use and so automated, that the kind of people that end up with Polaroids are perhaps not the most technologically literate people in the first place. And I don't mean that as like an insult. It's kind of like how, you know, if, like, for example, someone that, you know, uses, say, a MacBook, probably, I would hazard a guess, probably doesn't know as much about, like, or probably has a less chance of knowing about the ins and outs of computing, you know, could maybe build a computer or something like that, than someone that, you know, has built their own Windows PC, right? It's just because MacBooks are great because they're designed to be automated and easy to use and used by the masses, whereas something like Windows is a little less like that, and it's more customizable, and you can arguably do more. It's more open source and open-ended, and then you got Linux, which is even more open-ended than that. It's like, it just comes from the territory, right? Like, someone that uses Linux probably knows a lot more about computing than someone with a MacBook. That's just like a general rule of thumb. And I think in Polaroid land, it's the same thing. But you can educate yourself and learn about how these things work by Googling some of the online information. But yeah, I would change that about the hobby. I would really, and if I was Polaroid, I would, like, make it so difficult. Like, I would password protect the i2 until, like, you've done an online training module on how it works, and you get the password at the end, and, like, then it unlocks the camera. Because I think it would just solve so many problems. Like, people just, here's a lesson on how it works. Now you don't have to ask the same question that's been asked 500 times on Reddit. I think that's what I would do. Yeah, thank you for that question, Andrew. Monochrome Blues, again, this time asked me on YouTube instead of on Instagram. He said, the strength of your videos demand more than 2,000 subscribers. I appreciate it's a niche subsection of the photography marketplace, but Polaroid fans and just film photography fans need to subscribe to your channel onwards to 2,000 plus. Thank you, Monochrome Blues. I really do appreciate your feedback. Like I said, I'm doing my best here. It's a very niche subject matter, that's for sure. And again, I'd like to just say thanks to anyone that has taken time out of their day to follow me or watch any of my videos or make a donation or send me a camera to be repaired. Ashley, my friend Ashley, who I built the 1-600 for, she asks 2 questions. Number 1, what has been some of your biggest challenges starting up your channel? And 2, what's the most challenging repair that I've ever undertaken? Oh man, so many challenging repairs. I'm struggling to think of, like, a specific challenging repair. Like, where I haven't been able to, like, successfully do something. I don't think I've ever been, like, beaten by a camera. But one that does spring to mind is I made this chrome and tan model for a client, for this Kiwi guy, back when I was living in Melbourne. And his camera was in really, really good condition, and he was picking it up. I was going to go meet him. And when people pick up their cameras in person, I always give them a rundown of how it works and run through some empty film and that kind of stuff to show them that it's working. And immediately, within seconds of me putting the cartridge in, the reduction gear in the gear train snapped a tooth and the whole gear train was bricked. And it was like, wasn't my fault, wasn't his fault, wasn't anyone's fault. It was just a brittle part. It was on its way out. It was going to go. It's something that's quite common in early Fairchild cameras. And I was like, are you serious? And like I'd already glued his leather on. Like I did such a good job. And so I had to rebuild the entire thing. Like I was like, I'm so sorry. And yeah, basically had to send him home, go back to the workshop and pretty much redo everything that I'd already done. So yeah, that wasn't necessarily difficult, but boy, did it suck. Ashley says, one of the biggest challenges starting up my channel, other than just not having an ideal studio, as I said before, currently I'm doing this channel from a spare bedroom with an overhead camera. I mean, it's really all I need anyway, but that has been quite challenging just because I'm very limited with space. It's why all of my videos are the same format. I would say that it hasn't been particularly challenging. I would actually say it was probably easier than I expected. And the response, I think, to the channel was better than I expected. I think overwhelmingly people that comment on my channel and provide feedback do so in a way that is constructive and kind and comes from the right place. Most of my comments encourage like a real community vibe. It's generally very friendly. I must say one of the hardest things is for every kind comment you get, like for every 100 nice comments, you will get a comment from someone that you just think, how sad is your life to be commenting such a thing like that? And I won't name or shame any of them, but I will generally leave them up. But it's like, I think the hardest thing about running a YouTube channel is not like taking some of those just completely moronic comments personally. Like one of my favorite ones is like people that complain about like the long form content. And I'm like, you know, if I'm doing like a repair video that's like completely diving in depth, or I'm talking at length about a subject like, battery problems, it's a really long and drawn out explanation if you want to really dive deep into it. But that's the whole point of this channel. Like my point is not to do quick little tidbit of information videos. My channel is much more like Cathode Ray Dude and Louis Rossman and Adrian's Digital Basement and Necro, where it's channels where the content is a lot more long form and educational, and it just requires a lot more attention. And if you don't like that, well, that's fine. Like this is just simply not the channel for you. But it does annoy me when I get videos that are like suggestive that I'm like somehow too lazy to edit the content down. And I'm like, no, it's just that there's a lot to explain about this kind of stuff. And if you think I can condense it down, like you got another thing coming. It's like people that make comments that are like mean or just completely miss the point, or like somehow accuse me of shilling or like having some kind of like a bias. And I'm like, man, have you watched like my content and compared me to anyone else doing what I do? I think I try and go out of my way to be at like the least shill possible. I really do honestly try and compare. Like even when it's a product of mine that I own invent, I always try and bring up some of the disadvantages. For example, the Polar Vault. For every advantage that I go through, I try and bring up why there might be a disadvantage to using my method, because I want to be as open and transparent as possible. I don't want to be seen as one of these channels where, something new gets released and everything's all rosy and amazing when actually there's some kind of flaw, that I'm not talking about. I even did that in the SX70R video when I discussed how the shutter worked in terms of effective shutter speeds instead of true shutter speeds, because I didn't want people to get the wrong idea. And I think it's really important to talk about that kind of information. And so then when I get people somehow accusing me of like only making the I-type video that I did, where I discussed at length like all the different I-type adapters that you can get, because somehow like I'm shilling like I-type conversion services or like 600 modding services, and I want everyone to, shoot I-type and 600. It's like, no, it's not about that. If I refurbish your camera, I'm going to give you the option of shooting SX70 or 600. It's the same price. I don't charge any extra for my 600 conversions because I don't want to be seen as like pushing upgrades on people. But I recommend it because it's just better. There's a reason that Polaroid released a 640 ISO film. For the same reason that, color film ISO, we never stuck around with just 50 ISO color film like we had in the 1950s. We invented 200 and 400 and 800 ISO color films because of the performance improvements that you could get in lower light. And 600 film is no different. I'm not pushing it because I've got stocks in I-type or something. I'm doing it because you're going to get a better camera. You're going to get a camera with a faster shutter speed, a smaller aperture in sunny scenes, and more variability in low light environments. And the film is cheaper if you're buying I-type film, and it's easier to get a hold of. Look how many people are constantly online complaining SX70 films always sold out because they make it in smaller batches than the rest of the films. 600 film and I-type film I can buy at my local brick and mortar office work store up the road. SX70 I'd have to drive to some specialist camera store in the city if they have it at all. So yeah, those kind of things, I think that's the hardest part about running a YouTube video, because it's hard not to take comments like that personally. I always try and respond to those comments as best as I can anyway, if only just to help educate people better. If I make a mistake, I'll be the first to admit it. And I have had a few people point out mistakes in my videos, which I've then corrected in the comments section with addendums, and I'm always thankful for that. But if people are just doing something or commenting that's just absolute nonsense or doesn't make sense, or I think that they're totally wrong, I will try and correct them, even if it's potentially that they're just being a troll. Because I genuinely, I don't want people to ever get confused and take the wrong information literally. But yeah, I think that's probably the hardest part. But at the end of the day, I don't really lose sleep on any of this kind of stuff. But it is annoying. And I think that's not something specific to YouTube. I think that's just something with social media in general. But yeah, it is hard, and sometimes you do wonder, why someone would go to such a length of posting something in a public space like that. It's just, I don't think I'll ever really get over it. But like I said, fortunately, they're very rare. Very rarely do I ever have comments. I think I've only ever had one comment that I had to just straight up delete the entire thread because the comments that they were saying was just so mean-spirited that I was like, and I won't go into what it was all about, but I was like, what is wrong with this person? So usually I like to keep them up there, but this one was just so ridiculous. I was like, you know what? I don't need you. Go to a different channel if you want to be like that. But everything else, I try and keep up. But yeah, I think that's just the byproduct of the online world, isn't it? Everyone's a keyboard warrior. Everyone has their opinions. What do they say? Opinions are like assholes, right? Everyone has one, and many of them stink. And then Marky Bug says, do you think Polaroid film will get any better, or have they reached the limit of what with the chemicals that are currently legally available? It'll always get better. Every single time, every month that goes by, they try and make the film better. And I think the new release of their black and white film just proves that. It's oodles better than anything that they've ever done, and not something that even classic Polaroid was able to perfect. I'll remind you guys, Polaroid never had black and white SX70 or 600 film. Well, they did technically have black and white 600 film, but it was only made for a year or so, and then it was scrapped because it was terrible. It would fade, and it was rubbish quality, and it was just garbage, so Polaroid discontinued it. And that was at the height of their, powers. So the fact we have a brand new black and white film on the market with tones as good as what it has is really, really cool to see. But yeah, for sure, film will continue to get better. Thinking that it won't is just idiotic. It's always going to be improving, and they're going to do their best, because those that say it doesn't, why would you not want to improve your product? They are only going to get more sales by making their film better. The incentive is so high to make their film better, because it's still the biggest criticism is people go, oh, the Polaroid film's not quite as good as Instax or whatever. Yeah, so they're always going to be making it better. And chemistry is not chemistry on the level that Polaroid are doing is not the kind of thing where you go, well, that's every discovery we've ever made. There's always new stuff to be discovered. Next comment. Mask Media asks, can I recommend a good Perth local supplier with fresh stock of film? Will I be doing more I-type battery conversions in the future? I don't think I'll be offering this as a commercial service. It's way too hard. I think I would have to... I think the amount that I would have to charge for such a conversion is more than people would be willing to pay, and I do not think it'll be a financially viable decision for me to make, because the time it took for me to convert this, I could have refurbished 2 SX70s. So I don't think anyone's going to want to pay a full overhaul fee for one of these, because really that's what it takes. You have to dismantle it all the way down, so it is literally a full overhaul. I just don't think anyone's going to be interested in it. I have no plans to do it in the future. I did this one as a proof of concept to prove a point to Polaroid that what they did, there was no excuses for. In terms of local suppliers, get yourself to Officeworks and just continuously buy film from your local store. Once they run out of stock, they'll order more, and the film will constantly be fresh. That is what I would recommend. Tony Graham asks, did I ever find out, who this band is? Okay, so Tony is responding to a post I did ages ago. You know what? I have a YouTube channel now. I am absolutely going to do a video on this. To cut a long story short, I found... I'm into collecting records and cassettes and old audio gear as well. I might do a video on that in the future once I've got a proper house of my own, but long story short, I used to be very close with the team of people that worked at Dutch Vinyl in Melbourne, just in Abbotsford there. And they got 2 huge crates of cassette tapes, which I believe came from a radio station in Darwin. Now, many of them were legitimate cassettes, but they were promos, so they didn't have any album covers. They were just in blank cassette cases with handwritten labels. But the album itself was genuine. And because they didn't really have any covers and because they were in pretty rough condition, they offered to give them away to the first people that commented on their Instagram page, and I was one of the first. So I got this big crate of cassettes. And in the cassettes was a whole bunch of home dubs of albums and some homemade mixtapes that other people had made back in the 70s and 80s, which were really, really cool. Some classical cassettes, which I didn't think was worth keeping, so I dubbed those and made them blank. But in amongst them was a cassette tape that was warped. And when I tried to play it, because the cassette tape was so warped, it physically prevented the tape from traveling inside. And you could only listen to it if you physically held the play button down. Otherwise, the player's clutch would go off and it would try and stop the tape. But I noticed that there was music on it, and it sounded like kind of garage punk sort of 80s rock, Australiana type pub rock stuff. And what I ended up doing, I ended up taking the cassette tape apart, transferring the tape into the shell of another cassette tape, and then I ended up with a tape that you could actually play. And I realized that I couldn't find any information about who this band was. You search for the song lyrics, it wouldn't come up. I tried to search for all kinds of 4-track EPs, and I have no idea to this day who the band is on that tape. It sounds like a demo tape that they've made and got lost to time. And I ended up doing a rip of that album, and I put it on my Bandcamp, and I posted to Reddit. No one was able to give me any further information. But I would love that mystery to be solved because it's quite a cool little release. It could be that I've got the only copy of it and that the band completely faded into obscurity and never had a critical success. There might have been some absolute garage band with hopes and aspirations that never made it anywhere. But I own what is apparently a 4-track demo EP, and I'd love to know who the band was. So yeah, maybe I'll do a video on that and see if I get a copyright strike on YouTube.
Through the night, I am a stranger passing by. Hey, can you recognize my cry? What I want, what I need. Hey, judge, please look at me. Hey, judge, please set me free. Hey, judge, please look at me. Hey, judge, please set me free.
Ashley again asks, is there any mods that I've been wanting to do that I just haven't had the opportunity to do yet? Yes. Should I elaborate further? I would just say things are coming. Years ago, I tried to make a Polaroid one-step have a manual lens and shutter for manual control of aperture and shutter speed and stuff. I mounted a 110mm f4.5 Zeiss Novenar lens to that. It didn't work because the internal mirror box was simply too small for the lens to cover full frame. There was a mechanical vignette in all the photos, and it ended up being a bit of a dud. But I would love to revisit that project because I do have some ideas of how I could make it successful. And I would love to do a one-off manual control camera with f4.5 aperture. That would be really, really cool. Otherwise, I've got lots of things planned. I won't go into specifics, but I've got another battery adapter that I'm working on. There is always updates happening in the SX70R project, and there may or may not be some kind of a flash coming out in the future. That's all I'll say. NI5EI asks, a few years ago I was talking to you on Facebook and you said that I didn't do the capacitor change on SX70 cameras because there were too many variables. What changed my take on this since I've done it recently? That is such a long story. I've covered this in my old Facebook live streams. To cut a long story short, if you've never seen me do it with any of my other videos, a capacitor mod basically involves swapping out, or depending on the specific PCB, but it basically involves removing the original capacitor on a PCB and replacing it with one that is roughly 1/4 to 1/6 the value, depending on the condition of the electric eye. And that then converts it to be able to take 600 format film. Back in the day, I didn't offer that for a few reasons. First is my soldering skills were not up to scratch at that time. And I don't ever like to offer things as a service that I cannot do consistently and regularly. Now, I'm also aware my camera is about to die, so if it cuts here, you'll know what happened. The second reason is that at the time, like 2017 or so, the batches of 600 film in Australia, I think, were just garbage quality, and the SX70 film was actually much better. So it's like in the early days of Impossible Project, it was the other way around. I found SX70 film to be just garbage and 600 was better. And then around like 2017, it seemed to change. So in my opinion, back then, there just wasn't a decent reason in terms of the batches that were available within Australia. The third reason is that I could never figure out a way to do it like very consistently. It seemed if I did do the mod, it was kind of all over the shop. And that was because the information that was out there just wasn't very good. There was very little information about calibrating the solenoid and how the shutter could correctly behave. So my 600 modding only really started kicking into gear as of sort of 2021, and I think I was only mastering it as of 2022, which is quite late in the game. I know I've been refurbishing Polaroids for a good decade or so, but remember, prior to the SX70, I was mainly doing 600s, peel-apart cameras, and then like speed graphics and things like that. The SX70 was something that I would be doing an as-needed repair to. It wasn't something that I was specializing in. Now it's basically all I do. And all of the 600 calibration stuff that I do now to cameras is the byproduct of me quite literally taking an entire year of research and design and figuring out the best ways to do them. And I wrote a huge article for the Open SX70 project, which I do need to update, by the way, because I've since made so many more discoveries. But to this day, it's the most in-depth article on how to accurately 600 modify a Polaroid camera. As I said, I really do need to update it because I've got heaps of stuff that I've learned even now from back what I was doing then. But that was why. It was simply because I didn't personally think that the knowledge that was out there was good enough, and it wasn't until I dedicated way too much money and time into figuring out the best ways to do it that I actually decided to offer it consistently. And now, basically, I don't sell cameras that aren't 600 modified. And now with what we know about film, like we know that 600 film, which if you haven't seen my video on it, I highly recommend it. But basically, there is no reason, in my opinion, to shoot modern SX70 film because the emulsion is basically just 600 film with an ND filter baked into the actual negative in order to cripple the ISO down to 160. So in my opinion, there's no real benefit to shooting it anyway now. 600 film and I-type is the way to go, from my humble opinion. But back in the day, that certainly wasn't the case. SX70 film, at least what was available at the time in Australia, was just better quality. And yeah, just the information wasn't good enough for me to do 600 mods that were consistent. Like basically back in the day, like 2017 through to like 2022, if you looked up how to 600 modify a camera, the consensus was, yeah, you just slap a 150 picofarad capacitor in it and then you're done. That's not true at all. It's way more involved than that. I mean, that's like the basic premise of it, but that's like a hack way of doing it. If you do that to a Sonar, for example, it's going to underexpose because it's not the correct value. There's way more nuance to that. And the other thing is, like, we didn't even know how to modify a Fairchild PCB. Nick Kandari from Canada, who I gave a shout out to earlier in the video, he invented that technique, and that was very recently. That was only as of like 2021. So like all this 600 conversion business, like if you're wondering why I didn't do it back in the day, that's because now we're living in the cutting edge of 600 mods. The technology and the knowledge is only now up to the point where I would say, yeah, absolutely it is worth doing. But yeah, good question. And yes, something that I have changed my mind on in the past. Previously, I was dead against it. I was one of these people that in the past it was like, nah, man, SX70 should be original. They were designed for shooting 160 ISO film, blah, 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 blah. I made all kinds of cringe statements back in the day. I have completely done a 180 on that, and now it is 600 or nothing. I would not shoot anything else. Right. Starting in user. Actually, I think this. I don't know who sent this, but someone commented and said, starting in 2027, consumers will be able to remove and replace portable batteries in electronic products at any time. Yeah, this is because of legislation coming out of Europe. Any chance that this will be adhered to by Polaroid, namely the i2? Anything I've heard on this actually coming to fruition. I have had people involved in the i2's design reach out to me more recently that have said that yes, making a user replaceable battery in the next Polaroid camera is going to be more of a priority. Whether or not they'll do that only for the professional model cameras or whether they'll do that for all models is yet to be known. But yes, I do definitely think that is something that Polaroid will be doing. If only because they'll be forced to by European legislation. But that's really all I know. It's all speculation. Apparently the legislation that's coming, some people have criticized it as being a little bit toothless because they say like, oh, if the battery is deemed like a high quality enough, then you don't actually need to. So people might be able to like skirt regulations by going like, nah, it's got a really large capacity and it's high quality, so it doesn't need to be user replaceable. I don't know what's going to happen, but again, I think I've proven. Camera finally died there. Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the Euro regulation, but I think that I have more than proven that a user replaceable battery solution with hard cell batteries is absolutely viable. Because if the battery solutions that I'm using are powerful enough to power, say, an SLR 680, they will be more than powerful enough to power any box camera. And I am simply of the opinion that there is just no excuse for not having a user replaceable battery, especially when so many hard cell solutions exist. But even if they were to stick with the soft pouch cell design like the i2 uses, it should still be the kind of thing where with a JST connector you can just undo and do it at your leisure. The battery door I still don't think is anything that you need to be able to even clip off, but just something that's held in place with screws. Just to make it so that the user can do it, I think would be a real bonus. Next question, well, the final questions actually, was from Reddit. This is Maid of Mountain, who was commenting in regards to a post that I made about Aki Asahi Black Crinkle Embossed Leather, because this is my favorite finish of leather available for SX70 and SLR 680 cameras. And he says, I was a tan believer until I started following your Instagram, and now every time I see you post these skins, I understand where the love comes from. Or maybe it's just your crispy photography of such a pristine looking SX70 on a white background, making any skin look its best. Thank you for that. I do try my hardest with product photography to try and make my cameras look as good as possible. They say, also, I'm somewhat new to your work, but I've been going through your YouTube videos slowly but surely. A few questions for your 2000 sub special when the time comes. Number one being that I obviously repair cameras, but do I use them for photography? And if so, do I share my photography anywhere? Yes, I do. I do enjoy taking photos, although I must say that since COVID, my want for going out and taking photos purely for artistic purposes has diminished quite a lot. But that's not necessarily because I've fallen out of love with photography. It's just that it coincided with obviously the pandemic and a lot of big changes in my life. Me getting busier in terms of repair and then moving into state. And then now I've got a YouTube channel. And the other thing that happened to me around that time was I started getting into music. Throughout the pandemic, I taught myself how to play the synthesizer. I've always been into music, so it was great for me to finally have an outlet where I could make my own. And yeah, as a result, I just haven't felt the need to artistically go out and take photos. But if you do want some samples of what I've taken, scroll all the way down to the bottom of my Instagram feed and you will see some of my photography. I haven't uploaded any photography there for quite a while. But yeah, if you want an example of the kind of stuff that I'm capable of, please feel free. As I said earlier in this video, I don't think I'm a very good photographer at all by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, I try, and yeah, just for a bit of good fun. The next question was, do I prefer the manual focus or the Sonar SX70? Now, I didn't actually see this question, but here I happen to have an example of each. One standard, one Sonar camera. And then sort of, which one do I prefer to modify to Polar Volt mod and for 600? The first thing to know is that other than the autofocus, the cameras themselves, performance-wise, will be exactly the same. They have the exact same lens. It really comes down to personal preference. As I was saying earlier in the video, I think there's been a huge renaissance for Sonar cameras. I definitely remember a period in my life where I could not get rid of a Sonar if one came my way. And the last few months, I have been inundated by people asking if I have Sonar models for sale. And I think that's because people are finally realizing what great cameras they are, because any SX70 Sonar can easily be upgraded pretty much to the point where it becomes an SLR 680. In fact, if you have a Sonar camera and you add a mint flash bar, you basically get an SLR 680, just ever so slightly bigger. They are pretty much identical inside. I mean, these two cameras are very similar, both with battery packs, this one from Polar Studio. But the benefit with the Sonar is if the flash dies, well, you can take it off and remove it, and it becomes slightly more compact. But with that said, any sonar mechanism, the thing you need to be aware of is it is another thing that can go wrong. Sonar mechanisms can break. The optosensor in particular is something that dies fairly regularly. Well, I shouldn't say it dies regularly. It's common to find an unrefurbished SX70 Sonar have a dead optosensor, which is the bit that is responsible for measuring how much the lens moves forwards and backwards. And that is simply because I believe Polaroid didn't use the best quality of LEDs when they made these things in the infrared emitter and receiver. I've done a whole video on why it's an issue, but yeah, it is an extra bit of complication. It is obviously some extra bulk. Whether you get the 680 or the Sonar, it does add extra size, extra bulk to the camera itself. And as a result, it's something that, yeah, you should be aware of. Because honestly, the simplicity of having a camera which doesn't have autofocus is an advantage. Not only does it keep the camera's footprint a little bit smaller, but it's one less set of electronic components that you have to worry about. There is no autofocus to die on this, there's only manual focus. And so yeah, there is that little extra bit of reliability. So I like both of them, and I own each type of camera. I own an Alpha, a Model 1, an SLR 680, and a Sonar, and I love them all equally. Ultimately, they're capable of producing the same quality of image. And really, that's the important thing. That's what matters the most. In fact, if we take an SX70 Model 1, such as my SX70R, this is my personal camera here, I've got the Evo battery adapter on it. The aperture blade design in this and the 680 are basically identical. The performance that you can get from having a 600 modified Model 1 is exactly the same as what an SLR 680 is capable of. So it's just a much of a muchness. It's just, do you want autofocus or would you prefer something that is manual? That's really the only difference. But yeah, very good question. And that brings us to the end of today's question and answer segment. I had oodles of questions. I'm sure you guys are going to continue asking me questions from this point forwards. And yeah, I would basically like to just thank you guys again for just letting me do what it is that I do. I couldn't do it without your support. My channel would be nothing without my followers, and my business couldn't exist unless people send their stuff over to me to be repaired. So thank you again for everything. If you like what it is that I do, please feel free to like and subscribe. You can make a donation through my Ko-fi account as linked below, or simply if you want to support me, the best way you can do so is send me something to repair. If you have spare parts or parts that you're not using and you would like to make a donation so that your parts can help save someone else's camera, then please get in touch. Or if you have a product such as a flash bar or a new accessory that you want featured in my channel, please feel free to get in touch. I'm always after new products in terms of Polaroid that I love to show off, and I'm always happy to provide any constructive feedback, criticism, my opinion on things. If that's something that you would like, feel free to get in touch. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you in my next video.